jacked up review show. It's a jacked up review show. Jacked up review show. It's a jacked up review show.
Join us as we cover many an insane movie and numerous cult TV phenomenons. Are you ready to get jacked up? Are you with us? Then listen on.
Listener discretion is advised. It's a jacked up review show. It's a jacked up review show. Jacked up review show. It's a jacked up review show. It's a jacked up review show. Jacked up review show.
Welcome back, ladies and gents. Dina and I are just going head to toe, just trying to figure out what made another fun show last 6 years on the air. Is Crossing
Hello.
Jordan. How are you?
Yes.
So, yes, we got a cult show followed by a totally unrelated cult show that was on the same network that it crossed over with and totally rewrote the whole thing. We got Crossing Jordan, yes, which, long story short, like we've talked about before, it was essentially CSI meets ER. It was kind of a sleeper show. It
That's
launched.
the best thing to really say about that show.
Totally.
I never thought about it that way, yeah.
I just saw one critic say that and was like, yeah, it is kind of a more casual thing. Because, yeah, the filming style looks like NYPD Blue, and Gary Glassberg later went on to work on similar shows like NCIS, New Orleans, and Bones. But it's like, yeah, this was kind of the underdog show. It's like it had enough ratings to keep going by and let them do what they wanted, but everyone kind of forgot about it after a while. It was created by Tim Kring, who had previously done a show with the X-Files creators called Strange World, later created Heroes, as well as was the head writer for Treadstone, and created the show Touch. And he had also previously, prior to this, written for later seasons of Chicago Hope, which I think is a good start, because this definitely, I don't know about you, I definitely got St. Elsewhere vibes from this just all the time with their various
Yes.
imagination going wild. And
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think even I think Jerry Bruckheimer saw this show and got inspired to make Cold Case. I really do, just with all the envisioning and how they connect the dots to various things. And sometimes it was kind of even just let's reunite the main stars with actors they worked with on Law & Order. I think that's why they got Chris Noth to do that two-parter.
That was actually really smart, though.
Oh, that was definitely a good call. And going through here, I had no idea how many people actually started their careers. So let's get to it. It stars Jill Hennessy from Law & Order as the title character. The whole place is set in Boston, Massachusetts, and long story short, it's like all these shows where basically you kind of see that even with Bosch now, where it's like the main character must put up with their crazy staff and use their just brilliantly smart skills that only they developed throughout their childhood. It wasn't any kind of schooling or whatever. They just had a natural sixth sense kind of. And while at the same time trying to figure out who killed her mother years ago. This has also Miguel Ferrer from RoboCop as the main chief, Garrett. It has Ken Howard, who was known for HBO's Greg Gardens in The White Shadow, as Jordan's dad, Max, who is an ex-cop who owns a bar. It has Mahershala Ali, that's right, the future Oscar winner for Moonlight and Green Book, as Trey.
Nice.
As Ravi Kapoor as the Indian guy who's shy and just kind of full of shit. Entomologist. As Catherine Hahn in her first big role. Yes, guys, before she was on Anchorman, Step Brothers, and Parks and Rec, and WandaVision. She was in this. She was also in Captain Fantastic more recently. Has comedic actor himself, Jerry O'Connell from Stand By Me and Sliders. It's Detective Woody. What a goof.
Of course, that's a great name.
Yeah, indeed. I won't get into all the various guest stars, but there's even a young Jeffrey Donovan. Yes, pre-Burn Notice, post-Pretender as an attorney who basically just wants to be a dick and just reduce the budget of the medical office. They got a bunch of other good guest stars on here, including Lindsay Frost, Wallace Shawn from Princess Bride, Leslie Ann Warren herself. Yeah, it's a fun show. I'm actually surprised it never crossed over with CSI. It would have been perfect. It's the same
That would have been perfect. Absolutely. But you know what I was thinking about while you were talking about all that?
Sure.
I was thinking of the show The Mysteries of Laura.
Yeah, it's a very good comparison. Yeah, I mean,
right?
you take, I mean, yeah, Jill Hennessy was a serious actress who had been in a few like comedy movies, but always going to be known as just the dramatic actress who everyone thinks is cute. And it's like, yeah, it's like good contrast. You take Deborah Messing, who everyone thinks is adorable and just hysterical and Will and Grace, and yeah, put her in a serious. I mean, that's kind of what even Will McCormick did with Perception. This is the same kind of deal. It's like
right, and Travelers and blah blah blah. Right.
There you go. You take what Monk was doing almost around the same time, and what Psych even made fun of. In many ways, I think this is even why this shows just started copying each other, and whichever one was on, it didn't matter if it was the lesser show. There was a fan base for everything. I think without this show, you wouldn't even have Medium or Ghost Whisperer.
Absolutely, and I was also thinking about the story, right? She's trying to find out who killed her mom all those years ago.
Her dad has a hunch, but he's not sure.
Right, but it's very X-Files, right?
It's very. I definitely
for his sister.
Yeah.
And then you have Bones. She's looking for her family, and so you have these.
Hell, I didn't say
these
Tim
things
Kring.
that kind of leading to that.
Maybe Tim Kring was even watching just canceled supernatural kind of shows like Twin Peaks, I'm sure, and just said, "Hey,
oh God, yeah,
gotta have
Twin
a body
Peaks,
in a bag
absolutely.
that somewhere somehow someone's gonna get to the bottom of it." And I gotta say, even just with the
whole
cast,
premise of Blind Spot was that.
there
that
you
was
go.
the whole premise.
It always comes back to Blind Spot. I'm actually surprised this wasn't filmed in Canada, but yeah.
I know, right?
Well, hell, maybe because it's in Boston, maybe it is in the same universe as St. I don't know.
Yeah, who knows?
So I thought it started off pretty strongly in the first season and ended pretty well also. It says a lot for a show that just kind of each season is just very different. The music choices were not only what prevented a DVD release for years, but were very well timed. They weren't going back and watching a ton of this. I don't ever feel like there's a song in there. I mean, hell, even in the season 2 premiere when she's just on a foot chase going after a red herring of someone who may or may not have killed her mom is, filters, hey man, nice shot. But that was very well inserted versus other, some of the other
but I mean, look at Medium and look at Ghost Whisperer. You have all those 90s songs, right? I mean, Ghost Whisperer started off with a 90s song playing, and you just want to shoot yourself because it's so cringe. Medium doesn't have as much as Ghost Whisperer as far as
Medium's just too sad.
It's really like in your face, serious, but at the same time,
damn,
it's a little bit more believable than Ghost Whisperer.
In my
opinion,
and that's what was so funny is like I think Ghost lasted longer and was like both shows were hated by critics, but Medium won Patricia awards, and Ghost was just kind of the ones like, well, the critics don't like it, but everyone else is watching it.
Patricia was busy making Boyhood on top of doing Medium.
Yeah, the movie
that was
no one knew
that
was
was a
making.
12-year movie. So
It
you
paid
know,
off.
so yeah, I mean, 12 years, that's how long that damn movie lasted. And she was doing that while doing Medium. And it never affected that. But look at Crossing Jordan, right? So I kind of feel like in all the seasons that it was on, people were doing extra things on top of that, and it showed.
I really think so. Not and it helps that none of them wanted to go anywhere, but at the same time that you were going to see, like you say, differences in their hair or their wardrobe style, and
Right.
you're like, I'm not sure. Wait,
Mhm.
was that how the character was written? Is that a mistake? Is that a mistake, or is that a future side of their persona that they're just now revealing? I don't know. Until
Yeah,
5
because
episodes.
like when I was watching Medium, and I'm actually kind of going back and rewatching it again because that's what I do. But I'm going back and I'm rewatching, and I realized I never noticed she was even doing something else while she was doing that, because
Yeah.
I watched Boyhood and I'm like, holy crap, you're telling me this whole time she was doing Medium and that I never noticed. So I'm like, let me go back
could
and
we have
rewatch it
known?
again to see if I noticed, and I still didn't notice that. But with Crossing Jordan, I felt like if they went to go do something else, you could tell. And is it because of the actor, or is it because they weren't willing to write it in?
I think it was mainly. I think even Miguel Ferrer kind of was just always busy, never turning down things. He's a character actor, and he just loved to act. So I think he kind of got in the way. Maybe that's just my speculation. I don't know. Because I mean, he's just done Traffic
Fair
for
enough.
Soderbergh, so I'm sure he was around jumping on a few other things. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure they were even doing it around that time. I mean, you don't know how long you're going to be with anything, and you hate to turn down work. So I'm sure if Mahershala Ali and Khan were both starting their careers, I'm sure they were being offered to do, bit comedy parts, and it might be 5 days longer than originally signed up for, or even a TV pilot that fortunately didn't get picked up, so then they could go back to the show and continue their character.
Well, and let's touch on that, because now, correct me if I'm wrong, in Bones, did anybody leave during that time to film anything else?
Boreanaz and Deschanel basically just made small like indie film like appearances, and Boreanaz it was easy because like I think some of those were in the can before Bones became big, and then they released them, and then others was just a simple like 2 scene role as a cop or FBI agent, so he didn't really have to do much,
So it was pretty much straightforward. There really wasn't a lot of
Yeah.
distraction. And
No.
what about, the NCIS, CSI shows? I never really noticed any
Yeah,
real
they
crossovers
did
or
3
anything that was going to be in
voiceovers.
the way. Yeah. And that's
It,
what I'm saying. Like with Crossing Jordan, I always felt like you always knew.
I think you're very right. I think they were given a lot of notice ahead of time. It's like, hey, is this gonna last? I gotta know.
Oh, yeah. Right. So you got to
I-
make sure we keep other stuff. Yeah.
Am I a movie actor or a TV actor? I gotta know. I definitely get a 48 Hours vibe from some of them, especially the British guy, his back and forth interaction with the Indian guy, Bug. Alan Arkush kind of determined the visual style. He has done a bunch of other stuff, including Heroes and Defiance. But what's the one other thing I knew him from around the same time? It's so funny how he kind of went from just doing 70s disaster movies and other infamous stuff to stuff like this. Roxanne Dawson, that's right, Tori's from Star Trek, produced and directed a lot of episodes. So I think this definitely upped her career. And I always admired her as a director because, I mean, out of all the Star Trek actor turned directors, I mean, Jonathan Frakes, he was putting in time in the editing room and convinced them after a few episodes, I can handle 2 of the movies. And same thing with Michael Dorn and LeVar Burton. That's why they directed occasional specials in indie films that may or may not have been seen other than the festival. But then Robert Duncan McNeil, Paris, did the same thing. That's why he was like one of the head producers on Chuck. But yeah, Roxanne, she was interesting because like her first day of directing, she was sick, and she knew it's like something's going to go around, something's going to come out the wrong way, and people are going to say, oh, you blew it, it's like, so she just had to suffer, and it paid off. And it's like, and I really was not surprised when I saw that she had directed multiple episodes of the Closer franchise, and has now started directing a bunch of feature films, and it was like, yeah, she's bossing up.
Well, and I want to touch on that. So, like, you saw Dark Angel, right?
Yeah,
and
great.
you saw Heroes.
And similar, some around the same time,
Right.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Everything had to be
And-
stylish. Everything had to have a music video look, even if they weren't hiring MTV type people.
And then the panning that they were doing a lot of the time.
Expensive shots is like, that's how they sold it.
Absolutely.
It's like everyone's
Absolutely.
getting
But
paid.
You notice too, though, How I Met Your Mother did a few of those expensive shots too.
Yeah, they
so
would
that
have to
was
save
pretty
it.
Interesting.
They would have to
Yeah.
justify. It's like, we can only do it 2 to 3 times a season. So
Right.
same thing
Everything
with
else is close up except for like the occasional,
the
when they would do those really big expensive. But I felt with Crossing Jordan, that's all you saw.
Yeah, just tons of steady cam, and I mean, every show is looking like that after a while. West Wing, and it's like everything. Everybody's got to, if you can use static, but it's got to be saved for a close up, and the rest of the time, let's circle around. Let's see what they're doing while they're having a conversation. Walk and talk.
Very 24.
Yes.
Yeah.
What did you think of even some of the season-long actors that were on here, like Lorraine Toussaint, who was from Any Day Now and Law and Order, is like such a unusual role for her, and I think she
it's
just
a very
totally owned
diverse
it.
role.
Very
it
diverse
is
cast.
A very diverse cast, absolutely, but it's also a very diverse role. It's definitely not something that I would have been like, yeah, I would totally cast her for that.
And when she came in, it's kind of funny how the characters are reacting to her. They don't know if she's going to be, bitchy to them, or if she's going to be just kind of
she has resting bitch face. So, I mean.
And it's funny, is like, and what she says, you never expect, because she's just kind of studying everybody. She's profiling you without even meaning to. She's just second nature. It's like, it's part of the job, guys.
You just said the magic word. Profiling, as in the profiler. You remember that show?
That's a good show, and it's not even replaying often on that same channel, Start TV. And I think that show was very underrated, and I would even mention it. I'm like,
but it
you
has
guys
that
ever
same.
see that?
What is she? Who is she? She's already studying you. She already knows about you.
Oh yeah, I didn't think of that, but yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Dr. Sam Waters was on Profiler, was pretty much I don't want to say Sherlock Holmes. She was, it's like, let me figure out, how to raise my kid, my gal pal, and my boss, who I was once romantic with, and and that was another show where even when they started switching up who got what screen time, I always thought it was pretty. That was one of the rarities where people just liked how mysterious it was, and so everyone didn't really care who left the show after a while. It was on just long enough for 4 years, which I think is good for any show. And
I absolutely agree, but I'm laughing to myself because I'm picturing, and I'm hoping, I know people can't see me, but I'm picturing Emily Deschanel and Bones tilting her head a certain way because she's figuring out something, and then I see Crossing Jordan to the left tilt, and then I'm seeing the profiler with the right tilt, and it's like they had the same inquisitive head tilt, and I'm just giggling and laughing to myself because it's like, really?
Right. Also fun watching on here recently. Amy Aquino was on here as the no nonsense cop. Do you remember Carver?
Oh.
And so it's just so funny how is like she got a SAG award for being on Picket Fences, but people of this day and age, they probably recognize her as playing Lieutenant Billets on Bosch right now, as well as the psychiatrist on Marvel's The Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Yeah, but look at also Catherine Hahn, right?
Yeah,
she
absolutely.
Just won an award for freaking Scarlet. So, and she was on this show, and of course other stuff. And
but this was her first big thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was for 01 to 07, and here we are in 2021, finally getting an award for Marvel. So it's interesting. It's interesting that even then she was amazing. And when I saw her in Scarlet Witch, I was really excited to see her because I really hadn't seen her in a hot minute.
Yeah, and it's kind of just, it's essentially her third, claim right now to fame. So it's like, and I'm listening to that deep dive Office podcast, and Rainn Wilson gave a funny tidbit that I think is very true. Is like, it doesn't matter if no one else in the other part of the world is watching you. If everyone in LA is watching you, then you're gonna have a career. You're gonna be around.
Well, I mean, I also want to mention someone that never really gets mentioned, and he is just amazing. Mahershala Ali, who played
wonderful guy.
Dr. Trey Sanders. Not only was he fantastic in Luke Cage, but he was also fantastic in House of Cards. And he was fantastic. He's a very good, he's an amazing actor and artist.
What did you think about him on Alphas?
Oh, I mean, right? Holy crap. I mean, okay, so my real introduction to him, because I saw a little backwards. I actually saw Alphas before I even see Crossing Jordan. So that was interesting. And then after that, I saw him in House of Cards, and then I saw him in Luke Cage, and then I saw him in Alita, and then I saw him.
There you go. Boom, boom, boom.
And now he's playing in Blade, which I think he is Blade.
He's totally gonna be Blade.
That's amazing to me because he totally deserves it. But every time I know that he's going to be in something, I get really excited because I know how good he was. And he was so overlooked, I think, in Crossing Jordan.
He really was. And you kind of forget that he's on it after a while. And I think that's just it.
Yeah.
It was his start, but he didn't have enough to do. So that's kind of my only real gripe, just looking at it back now. But at the same time, he did have some good dialogue in moments. He just could have been used a little more.
Absolutely.
But yeah, he was in Benjamin Button and this one underrated political all-star drama that no one saw that I thought was good called Crossing Over with Ashley Judd and Harrison Ford. And I didn't recognize him from either of those, but I did see him in Predators and, Hunger Games and Place Beyond the Pines. And so that was just it. It's like, he was kind of like Giancarlo Esposito. It's like, I've seen a shit ton of his resume, but I recognize maybe 3 of those 12 appearances. So it's like, it was kind of that. It was a numbers game. And then it became a quantity versus quality. It's like, oh, he was awesome in that. I hated the movie, though. And so, yeah, all these actors, this was around the time when you were often just lampooned or just separated in a corner. You're either TV or your movie. And since these guys were all character actors, it's like, it was a mix of everything. It's like Miguel has been doing lots of 80s cult movies for years, and Jill has been doing TV for years. So that's the draw. And now we're going to bring in all these other unknowns who, I don't know, we saw the auditions. They rock. They're awesome. Let's bring them in.
So how do you feel about like seeing these people in this show, Crossing Jordan, and now you see them doing big blockbuster hits that we have seen? But then you have like Bones, who hasn't.
That's a good point, because I want the Bones actors to do more, and yet those are just
really good in their own right.
And yet I think Bones is the better show, and that lasted 12 years. I think both shows are career greats for both actors. And like you say, I think everyone was too distracted by actors on other procedurals. It just, again, the market was becoming oversaturated before anyone realized it was, like Chicago Hope was always a rival to ER. And it's just like, most people were watching both anyway. It didn't matter. And same thing here. I think with these is like, people would probably watch this if they weren't watching CSI that night. And so it just became, okay, well, you got to choose, because back then, guys,
remember how we talked about that, right?
TiVo became a thing in 03, but before that, we had to set the VHS tape and hope it recorded most of the program.
That's right, because I remember we talked about that. You'd have this like 2 or 3 shows all at the same time, and you're
unless
like,
you had 2
really
TVs at the same time.
I really want to see this, but I'm going to miss out on the other show, so I'm going to go ahead and record it or TiVo it.
My mother told me endless stories how, if father didn't set
Yeah.
the DVR, she was just racing home to just try and, see whatever she wanted to watch and then cook dinner,
And it's so great we have streaming now, so we can just watch it whenever, pause it, get
Oh,
up, whatever.
people don't realize how good they have. Just like when we were talking before we even started recording, we are talking about photos. It's like, I loved doing the Kodak. It's like I had to time the shot, and sometimes it wouldn't come out the way I wanted. Sometimes
You
it would
get a
look
finger
crappy.
instead.
Yeah, and sometimes based on where you were, the photo just might look, a little schlocky, and so you had to just retake it. Or you could just take it in the camera and develop it at the Kodak store, Eckerd's, before CBS took it over and decided to retire it.
Show your age, why won't you?
Yeah, I even used it briefly in at college, believe it or not, for a art assignment. I was like, oh, this is interesting.
I actually used an old Polaroid.
Nice.
Yeah, and I actually
My dudette.
Picture. Yeah, so I had to take pictures of like someone's face, someone's arm, someone's leg, and put it all together as a big collage of someone's like body, just using different shots of using Polaroid, and it was a really cool assignment. It was art 4. So it was
nice.
I enjoyed it a lot. Yes.
Did you ever frame some of those photos? Because sometimes that was the trick too. Is like if it looks good as a mini photo, will it look good when you enlarge it digitally and frame it?
I actually did win an award. I took 2 photos. One was like the roundabout in my front yard, and then the other ones were like the paintbrush, Indian paintbrush flowers with the blue bonnets, and those were actually put into an art contest, and I won first place. So there you go. And they are framed. They're still at my uncle's house in Floresville. So
Dina's gonna have to sell her work. I'll be there. Oh, nice. Now, speaking of flashiness, how do you feel the style is on this show? Is it kind of inseparable from all the other shows that have popularized the style, or does it stand well on its own style? Or did it become just the blueprint and other shows did it better,
I wouldn't say it was a blueprint because it did remind me of the whole Dark Angel heroes.
I got vibes of Homicide each time they're in the coroner's office.
Homicide, Chicago. It just felt like it didn't really stand alone, and it wasn't really that special. Crossing Jordan to me was watching my favorite shows all smushed together into one show. Mm-hmm. And because of the panning and the lighting, and I'm not saying the acting was bad, it just everything was happening all at the same time, to the point where if you're gonna have to choose between, for example, if you have to choose between Ghost Whisperer and Medium, you're probably gonna watch Medium over Ghost Whisperer. Yeah. If you have to choose between NCIS, the original one, and CSI or CSI Miami, or CSI Vegas and Miami, which one you're gonna watch? You're gonna watch Vegas over Miami.
It depends on what mood you're in for,
right. So I kind of feel with Crossing Jordan, I really was never racing home to watch it. It was more like if I get to see it, I get to see it. But it really wasn't something that I was like, oh my god, I have to see this right away. It was. No, I'd rather watch Bones. I'd rather see the other shows, and then I'll get to this one when I can.
Bones is definitely the superior show just because the characterization was just more and
the lighting was brighter. The acting I felt was a little bit better,
and the suspension of disbelief was even better than CSI.
The storyline, absolutely,
because it's like okay, they're going to try and do most of the rules better, but along the way, there's going to be a Lethal Weapon moment where someone is acting unprofessional and they laugh it off in humor, or Agent Booth is there to basically, tell his boss, got this, leave us alone. And while someone says something that might not be the most plausible thing to say in a FBI workplace. This was interesting because it's like they weren't involving the FBI. They were just kind of doing regular Boston police. They were kind of the go-between. But yeah, I did. And first season was pretty good.
Think about it too, right? First season was pretty good. Then after that, I think they kind of ran out. But what's that show that was dealing with the dead? They were like Their
Ooh.
jobs were to be they were like they ran a mortuary in their home.
Ooh.
I forget what it's called, but
do you know who was
that
in it?
no, I'll have to look it up here in a bit.
Mortuary house.
Yeah, like I forget the name of the show, but it was having to do with like they ran a business within their home. Their
Is it
whole
recent?
no, this was during the same time.
Yeah,
Like
any
in the
idea?
grave or something like that.
Was it Picket Fences?
No. But you see how many similar shows there are though?
Oh, exactly. I think this was
Like
kind of
Dead
like
Like Me.
that's a good contrast. I think this was even like
Yeah.
Lied to Me, where everyone was taken aback
Yes.
by the gimmick. But at that
Yeah.
point, the showrunners had done so many other hit shows that around that same
Yeah.
time, it kind of got discombobulated and it lasted long enough. But then after a while, it just kind of just, you know, as soon as low ratings were in, it's like done. Like there's this similar show right now with we're seeing it with these other shows that are kind of a reverse Dexter 7, like Evil and Prodigal Son, and those are both kind of, if you like them, you might tune in. If you don't, you might just casually view them. But yeah, one of them got canceled after 2 years, and the other decided to just go straight to the streaming sister channel because they just thought it was strong, but not strong enough for network. So I think it's another one. I think to see this pre-streaming internet show, it really didn't waste any time. It tried to be as different each week, wacky as it could. And I was really taken aback by that because usually the first season is always just kind of a slog. Everyone's taking their sweet time setting it up and begging networks, give me a chance. And I was surprised at even the amount of star power and guest stars here.
Well, yeah, I mean, but at the same time, though, if we look at Crossing Jordan, not only do we have a very similar premise, a very similar story,
Mhm.
and because there was a similar premise, similar story already involved with other shows, how was it supposed to get itself to be special?
Pretty much it pretty much, I think it didn't help that Tim Kring had already kind of, you know, done an X-Files inspired show. So all he could do in the basis was just make something that he might have been the first to think of it, but you know, by the time he came around to doing it, everyone's already used to all these other quirky things that everyone's already been doing for a while. I'll say this: I didn't think that Jerry O'Connell's cop stuff, I didn't think really worked all that well. It wasn't that interesting, and he was there because, you know, chicks thought he was handsome and guys thought he was funny, and so he was just kind of like the Nozo on NCIS. He was kind of that dry humor guy. And
the show I was thinking about was 6 Feet Under, by the way.
Oh, see, there you go. Maybe that was how it got started in the first place. Is like NBC got word that HBO wanted a show where people speak with the dead. And they're like, we need something kind of like that, but we don't want it. We need to compete with CSI. So.
And we need to compete with Whisper and
right. ER's might
Medium
be
and
this
ER.
year
Yeah, Boston. Yeah,
Right.
I mean, there's all these shows, right? And Bones and Crossing Jordan, you know, X-Files and
what did you think of some of the
Spot.
crimes? Because the crimes were very unusual for this kind of show, because usually they kind of just settle for like a simple kind of Miami Vice or Die Hard type storyline. But I was watching a bunch of these episodes recently. It's like, holy shit, they got a bunch of stuff that's very similar to Seven or Speed. And there was even a few episodes that reminded me of Dog Day Afternoon to some extent, just very uncanny spree kill or robbery.
Well, it wasn't surprising to me just because of numbers. Numbers should be thing.
We're so spoiled by the stuff that came after. Is like, yeah, everyone was doing it, and it was kind of the one. It was just using stuff that the other show next to it. It's kind of the same thing with how Simpsons was the network cartoon show and South Park was the cable TV show at the same time, and they were both making digs at each other. It's like, I can say this and you won't go there, and vice versa. We're going to do this kind of humor, which you guys are too immature to do. So I do think, yeah, it's like, I think they were taking notes. They're like, you know, we're not going to do the CSI thing where everyone is superhuman and carries a gun and a medical license and can solve the crime in less than 12 hours. Apparently medicine works super fast, and this one was kind of more is like, one thing they really didn't have that much of is like any bureaucrat that came in, very limited. They didn't want that to take up much of the season at all. They just wanted them to be there at the start and taunt, show their face, and then take off. And the rest of the time was plot A and B, and then maybe plot C as Jordan finds out someone more about her mom. But rarely did they do plot
Right,
C.
but that's also something I also noticed too between that show and all the other shows that followed. They all kind of had the same blueprint, right? They all kind of had a cookie cutter feel. They never wore hairnets. They never wore the right shoes. They never. They always had. They always would tuck their hair behind their ears while wearing gloves. And I noticed that with Crossing Jordan and the other shows as well, they all did the same thing. There was not one time that I saw a show during that time, correct me if I'm wrong, that actually followed protocol.
No. Even Rizzoli and Isles started at first and then gave it up by season 6 or 7. They're like, nope. Giving up. You got to shoot fast. Those who like it. And that's another cool show too, because that was set in Boston. But that kind of stood out because of how it characterized its killers and was kind of a more plausible.
Do you feel like Rizzoli and Isles basically finished off where Crossing Jordan really couldn't go? Like where it could have gone?
Oh, totally. Because much like The Closer, I mean, those were both, Michael and Robin production company produced stuff for TNT, and they were always gritty enough, but good enough to where they could still show it on cable TV, and they would just have to edit out a few uses of the word shit or shorten a risque scene, and they didn't have to worry about, editing it down for syndication. And same thing, Jordan was kind of edgy, like a lot of Tim Kring stuff. I mean, I'm even surprised at how much he got away with years later on his show Heroes. I'm like, wow, did I just see someone get decapitated on network TV? I would see stuff like that.
And the ribs broken and popping out, right? But if you think about
this one
it,
wasn't too graphic,
Heroes,
but it was grim.
Because of Heroes, we were able to get alphas. We were able to get the X series. We were able to get the other shows in syndication.
I think people, if anything, people who liked or didn't like it, everyone was watching it because everyone was into seeing spectacle shows like that and Battlestar and Lost, and they're just like, and they wanted something else besides seeing a comic book adaptation. Let's see some original superhero-based idea. And so, yeah, with this, I think he wouldn't have done anything else, Tim Kring, the creator. And at the same time, I mean, I think it's fun. It's still a lot of fun. I still think it's one of my favorite shows, but yeah, I don't think it would take a while for it to rank with all the other stuff. It's still better than a lot of the other shows, though, that would get way too just loopy to where it's like, wait, what? And this had, for me, the right amount of people goofing around, but not to where they're being so inappropriate to where you're like, yeah, I've lost all sort of any kind of belief in this world that you're building.
Oh yeah, I mean, it didn't pop the bubble too much.
Right.
It didn't pop it too much. Yeah.
There's been plenty of other shows where, I mean, that we've even mentioned in the past before, where we're like, I mean, it's passable, but it's not something I'm going to record all the episodes of. It's not. I don't have to follow it closely. There's nothing really keeping me coming back. And yeah, I keep coming.
Were you able to watch all of Crossing Jordan, or are you just like catching up again?
I've been catching up again, and I really, and I've seen it all through the years, and I think it holds together well. And what it lacks in for all the stuff I love about, again, Homicide, all the Law and Orders, even the ones I'm watching now, like Bosch and City on a Hill, which have some very well done ways of inserting plot twists without losing sense of their just their subplots, let alone getting messy. And Medium loses me after a while just because it's just so damn morbid and grim. And it's well
That's
acted.
what keeps me going because of Hannibal. right? It has the same feel to it. So
Well,
I like
Hannibal,
stuff like that.
Hannibal, I think, is more of a Criminal Minds thing. It works for me in that retrospect, where it's like, yeah, you're going to see a very emotional guy and a different side of him. Plus, he, was already a different version of a pre-established, book-based movie character. So it was kind of like the Jack Ryan show. It's like, I want to see how well this guy is going to portray this, cult pop culture icon. And then at the same time, it became its own deal from the get-go. Definitely good writing and producing on that forefront. This show, it pretty much, like you say, I mean, Profiler was kind of late to the game, but it was kind of still worthwhile watch. And
oh yeah,
I think it's kind of in that same.
But what about the one season of Dresden Files? Because I felt like Dresden Files was very similar to those as well.
Dresden Files, I really dug a lot, and I think it just was one of those. USA ordered it because they wanted another Dead Zone, and it didn't ever take off because they scheduled it poorly. But Dresden Files would definitely fall into canceled shows that could have definitely held their own, had the powers that be not, pulled the plug.
But do you feel that it's like because he was a detective, I know supernatural powers, but he was also like a profiler.
Because there's plenty of shows that were on forever that after a while, half the audience just kept losing interest, and other people kept tuning in because that's all they watched. So I don't think it ever became like Supernatural, where the fan base is divided and just getting into wars.
And it's funny because like I still can't get past the few episodes that I've seen on the first season of Supernatural. Yeah. I think I've seen like 2 or 3 episodes total. I just have a really hard time with that show, and I don't know why. I mean, I sat down and binged on the original Charmed with no issues, but I just can't get into Supernatural. And it's like, what, season 10 now? It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I think, and unfortunately I have to do that with some shows where it's like, I'm sorry, I'm skipping this season. I'm skipping through and going to the good parts, going to the resolution, seeing if the characters are interesting.
I can't even do that with Supernatural. And I know people like really, really like it. And I really have tried, y'all. Like, you have no idea how many times I sat down to watch episode 3 and I either fell asleep or I was on my phone the whole time because I just had zero interest in it. I really, really, really did try. It's the same thing with Walking Dead. I saw the first episode, and once he killed that little girl, I was done.
I saw the first season, and it was
I could not continue with that first episode. I don't know if it's because I have kids myself. I mean, I've seen some pretty fucked up shit in my life, but I feel like that was not a good way to start a show. And I think that zombies. Show. The only thing I like is like Zombieland or Shaun of the Dead. I like stuff like that.
Not even Dawn of the Dead.
Oh yeah, I mean, but that's like a classic though.
Well, that's
with The Walking Dead. I feel like they're being grotesque on purpose because I mean, I even like iZombie. I think it's hilariously cute.
iZombie is just a good comedy, and I think
it's a good, and I think with Walking Dead, it was like right in your face, bam. And
that and Game of Thrones, I think, just spoiled people for life. It's like everything has to be over the top, gruesome, and
which is funny because I actually like Game of Thrones. I watched all 8 seasons.
I enjoyed it to a point. I could not
get into Walking Dead, and I could not get into Supernatural. I tried.
Game of Thrones. People are gonna lynch me for this, but I'm sorry. Game of Thrones was a watchable 8 years of nonsense that I wish I could take back.
You are now lynched. Yep. You are forever not
I'm set afire.
I know. You are fired.
I couldn't get for those last 2 seasons. Those were torture. But
I think it's because I read the books and I was already such a huge fan of the book series. So when I found out that it was going to become into a TV series, I was really excited because there wasn't a movie yet. And it's kind of like with the, it's the same thing with LOTR doing a TV series. I'm really excited about that because I already read the books, I already saw the movies. I'm good. I don't need the TV series. But with Game of Thrones, it was just a book series. At the time, I think there was only like 4 or 5 written, and it wasn't until, or 3 or 4, and not until he got into it that he, the TV series, he actually had to write more script because there was no more books. So
I kind of believe that claim. that he stole
Yeah.
his material from other books. I know many people don't believe it. I'm like, yeah, if 3 people are trying to sue you, I don't think it's just money anymore.
Well, it's also really, interesting when you see a series that's straight from the book series that he already had, and maybe
they finish it for him before he can finish it.
Yes, and because there's such a big fan base, same thing with The Walking Dead. Now there's comic books, there's or illustrated, whatever y'all want to call it. It's fucking comic books, y'all. But The Walking Dead, there's comic books, there's cons, and now there's like a big thing. Yeah. And Game of Thrones did the same thing. Supernatural did the same thing.
Yeah.
But Crossing Jordan could never get to that point, and it never did get to that point. While Bone still has a huge following, even now, House has a huge following.
House is, I mean, I stopped watching House for a while, and then I watched the final season. I'm like, God, good episode, bad episode. That final season was great, and that's how the show should have ended. That made up for all the various actors leaving and various writers changing up. So let me bring you to this. Should Crossing Jordan crossed over with Las Vegas, or was that just a mistake?
Oh, you know what? If it wouldn't have, it would have ended.
That's fair enough, because I was watching those
that's what saved it another, season or two, because honestly I felt like it had nowhere else to go.
Well, and I've been watching E! Channel a lot lately, not because the channel is any good. I fucking hate that channel, but because they were showing Las Vegas reruns. I'm like, hey, I remember that show. That was kind of CSI meets Dallas. You're in Vegas. Wow. Everything is all fancy. And of course, kind of like the A-Team, someone would come in and try and take over the casino or set off a bomb, something just absolutely fucking stupid. And you would just laugh and say, huh, that's wild. And I was guffawing at all the various guest stars they had. Some of them were before they were big, like Elena de la Garza was on one. I was like, I'm so glad she was on better shows where she actually spoke. The
that's
Chinese,
a good point. Yeah,
the Chinese actor, him as the store clerk and falling down. I forget his name. He's Tayo on The Closer. He was on an episode as a kingpin gambler, and I thought that was a lot of fun. But yeah, I guffawed even more because Alec Baldwin even had a brief recurring 2-episode role on there as a guy who tries to take over James Caan's casino, and he just lies out his ass, and you can tell Alec is just like, hey, however this role is written, it demands that I choose scenery because me.
Yeah, you have to, right?
And a lot of people I remember bashed that show because then James Caan went on the record. He pulled a Charlie Sheen on in 2.5 Men where he's like, this show is fucking garbage. I want out after 5 years.
Yeah.
And he got replaced by Tom Selleck. And truth be told, that didn't bother me at all.
No, and it was Tom Selleck was made for something like that.
Yeah, but I mean, truth be told, looking at it even more closer, the 3 leads on there were kind of the main stars. I never really thought it was James Caan's show, even though he was the main guy on the poster. I was like, yeah, I think this was Josh Duhamel and Vanessa Marcel and the 2 other characters show.
To catch someone's attention, so let's use faces that we do know. What about Nash Bridges and what was that other one, the karate?
Oh, in Plain Sight.
In Plain Sight, Nash Bridges. Yeah. They all kind of had that same look, and it was all about what are we doing today? We're gonna catch the bad guy at the end,
right?
And they're damaged somehow.
It's somehow damaged, and James LaSure was just such a great actor. So when I saw him in some of those Aaron Sorkin shows and even other sitcoms, I'm like, yeah, he had it made. He was the guy who made us guffaw, even when the episode really wasn't working or was just too cringeworthy. Las Vegas is just like, it's basically, it was made by toxic douchebags, and yet it appealed to so many more because there was enough for an Ocean's 11 kind of crowd, if that makes sense. It was very lowbrow and shameless at the same time, and so it's just like, yeah, on that level it works. It'll never be one of my favorite shows, but I don't regret watching it. I was able to watch it without groaning too much or being like, I wonder what sexist writer wrote that. It was like, truth be told, they were just having too much fun. I'm sure it was produced by some other shithead in Hollywood, and someone said, well, we'll go there, but we're not going to go there since we're network TV.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too, right? The balance.
Is like, if I showed this to my parents, one of them might be like, that's pretty nutty, and the other might be like, I'm finding this very, annoying and inappropriate, I think it was kind of just always, it knew instantly it was going to be a naughty show, so that's why it was on after 10. It's like, okay, so you watch Crossing Jordan, which you can watch with teens, and this, you might want to send the kids to bed, unless you care.
Oh yeah, no.
Unless you're cool with them
they're just
watching crude SNL skits, then yeah, they can watch it.
Yeah, there's a few episodes in there. I mean, just same thing with like Medium that you're like,
and
that
more or
might not be
less
appropriate.
no, yeah, CSI was always kind of getting in trouble with the Parents Television Council, but yeah, there were some moments on there, like on Medium, where I'm like, yeah, they graphically described someone getting beaten to death or raped. Who's this for again?
On like the second episode. I mean, you can't.
Yeah, even though it's mentioned in dialogue, you're like, well, but what will or will not be allowed to screen? And yeah, you can tell what times where someone was giving a set of rules, and other times when someone was like, well, I know my boss isn't paying attention, so let's see what we got before we air it. And it is always funny seeing what shows had certain scenes that were included on the DVD versus were only included on a certain airing, or in the re-airing censored it. And this never had as much backlash as CSI or even X-Files, where you're like, send your kids to bed. But I did notice how they kind of were doing what David E. Kelly was doing with all his shows, where people forget he was the first guy, and still the only guy today, to win for best drama and best comedy in the same year. And that was with The Practice and Ally McBeal. So
yeah,
and The Practice was well liked, but its ratings suffered. So he started doing crossovers with Ally McBeal on Fox, and so then brought over. And then I was slow to the party. I saw Boston Legal first, and so I was like, let me see where it all began. But it's kind of been, I noticed he kind of did the same kind of predicament there, where he hinted that both lead characters of other shows might be dating each other off screen, and he never went anywhere with it. And they kind of went there with Las Vegas, where they're like, yeah, Jordan's going to be dating some of these hunks on Las Vegas, but they never showed it in either one. They just showed her visiting the casinos.
It's interesting that you say that, because as you were saying, Ally McBeal, I was thinking of Alias.
Similar show in terms of just,
right. Then you have Terminator, the
sexuality.
Sarah Connor Chronicles, right? Then you have La Femme Nikita. So we notice this, right? We notice that there's always
characters with a certain kind of crazy hair,
style,
and sexualized.
Yeah, I like the main actors from Castle. They all kind of have that similar.
Everyone has to look like the other to some extent.
Crossing Jordan, they all have that resting bitch face. They all have very similar faces. They look very like, skinny and fit, and they're like model-esque. Which is funny because in Terminator Sarah Chronicles, she was in Game of Thrones, but I digress.
Haiti.
But yeah, so it's interesting to me when I see things like that, and you see these similar characters along the way. So at that point, like we were talking about, how are they supposed to stand out, right? When you have so many similarities, that's why for me, while Crossing Jordan's not a bad show, it just wasn't really a standout show.
For sure. I would put it around my favorite crime shows of the 2000s, but it might have to be an honorable mention because there's just so much other better stuff out there. I think people now will still like it, especially if they're fans of the actors, want to see where they start. I would like to see how many people might light up their Tumblrs or Instagram feeds. They're like, I'm going through Mahershala Ali and Catherine Hahn's, their debut roles. I'm like, awesome. It's where I first saw them.
Yeah, and think about it though. You have a lot of people who started because of the show, right? And a lot of people who don't know about him, they're like, "What? They were in Crossing Jordan. I need to go watch it now." And then they start trending because they didn't know about it. I mean, just like me, just like you, there's a lot of shows that we saw only because that character was in it, that actor was in it.
NBC really did screw the pooch. They must have just really been unimpressed with the turnout, because I really don't know why they didn't try and license, the music and try and release it. Did they just need 5 more critical boards? So I think they canceled it. They just were more loyal to, again, whatever John Wells was producing on with his West Wing and ER franchises, or Dick Wolf doing endless crime shows. So I think it is interesting. It was just kind of late to the party, and I don't think we would have Rizzoli and Isles or Bones without it, but at the same time, those shows did that so much better. So it's like, it was kind of just, the doorkeep. It was the additional bartender who does his job, but doesn't have as much charisma or enthusiasm. It's enough to stop him from being, again, the sexy, mindless show that everyone watches but doesn't think is as critically or substantially significant, like a CSI or a Ghost Whisperer. But at the same time, it's like, it just doesn't. It has a cool cast and all, but it doesn't have as much of an attention-getting style. I can kind of coast through this, and I think 24 kind of fucked it up too, because that was when they were also embracing TV shows now, getting special features and DVD treatments. People would gladly say, "Hey, if it's good, I'll rent all the tapes or DVDs at Blockbuster."
Blockbuster, Hollywood Video,
Mom and Pop. And personally, I hated renting TV from rental stores because they were never in the same order, or people never returned them. And shows like what I mentioned is like, you got to see it all, otherwise you will not understand it and get bored.
That's very true.
Would this have been better, you think, on a different network like Fox or ABC?
Not Fox, because we both know it would have been canceled within like the first season. Because how dare you have a female lead?
Right. Anything with a minority or female lead often got canceled because Fox.
What about
CBS? Maybe could have worked it better, because I think ABC would have wanted something like
CBS
this.
CBS for sure, because I think they would have been able to curb it more for the viewing at home versus.
They might have even
already had.
Yeah, they might have even gotten more comedic actors to the cast.
Absolutely. And that's the thing though, is that I think by doing it the way they did and where it was, they did get away with a lot, but a lot of things should have been censored that were never censored.
Totally. Who knows? Maybe it should have just been part of the 6 Feet Under universe.
I agree. I think it should have. I should have been Stars, or
because it wanted to be mature,
something like that.
It could have been like a typical Showtime or HBO show where they demand that there be some gore and nudity in the pilot episode, and the rest you're free to do what you want as long as we get good ratings. As long as we get an Emmy, that's all that matters. We don't care.
As long as we get something, I don't really care. Absolutely.
Right. As long as you do something that makes us our brand, because it is kind of funny how those networks had shows that were getting them awards that the executives were on the record saying, we don't really actually like these shows, but a lot of people do, so we keep airing them.
So do you feel like, how long it ran, it should have continued, or do you think it should have died off a long time ago?
I think it was just right. I think 6 seasons, I was satisfied with that full run. And it was one of the better shows to, kind of like Chicago Hope. It ended when the network said it had to end, and it wasn't in such a point where you're like, I want more, or that's not enough. It was just like, yep. And it concluded, and I'm satisfied with all 6 years. But at the same time, I'm distracted by 500 other shows, realistically 5 other shows that are taking up my time and way more and fascinating and rewatchable.
See, at least now that we have streaming, I can bounce around through my different shows, and I
Totally,
don't.
you can
They're not
buy a show
fighting
on
for my
Prime.
attention.
You can watch something obscure on Tubi that you're like, oh my god, I heard about that. Now I can watch it and not spend $30, plus shipping. Yeah, really what I'm amazed by is it didn't do all the other post CSI profiler shows where it's just like everybody is just running after a serial killer and it takes a whole season for it to stand out at all. But like you say, it had so much competition. It just took the best elements of all the other shows and it just put them in a blender. And it's like, if you like that, you're going to like this. But at the same time, well, it's kind of like with which Die Hard knockoff do you like the most? Do you like Olympus Has Fallen or Air Force One or Speed, or do you like more just...
I was watching movies that made us, and they were talking about like Die Hard, and they were like, there was Die Hard on a plane, Die Hard on a train, Die Hard on a bus, Die Hard on a boat, under siege.
Yep.
And everyone was trying to copy it. It's the same damn thing for TV shows.
Yep.
Same thing.
Everyone was trying to be like X-Files or ER, and I think it didn't help that around the same time we had a bunch of blockbusters that were trying to be like Alien, Jurassic Park. Now we got even worse. Now, instead of people trying to imitate Lord of the Rings, it's even more annoying because now everyone, you've seen with Shannara Chronicles and even Divergent, everything has to look or be aimed at teens and young adults and be kind of a Hunger Games or Harry Potter kind of thing. It's like,
oh, you mean like the 100?
Oh, there you go. Yeah, it's like, and now with seeing cult stuff like that, yeah, now everything kind of has to be kind of a semi-Running Man or fight to the death.
The Maze Runner.
Runner, and then we gotta. Anytime the fight scenes look different, oh, well, now it has to be kind of like the Equalizer or John Wick or Taken.
And everybody has to use that same, especially if you're female, everyone has to use the same leg grab that Black Widow did in the first Iron Man.
There you go. Everyone's got to wear a bodysuit. Everybody's got to...
Yeah.
I mean, it was kind of forgivable when you saw sci-fi shows kind of imitating Forbidden Planet or 2001 or Star Trek. It's like, well, because those are kind of the godfathers, and they'll eventually become their own thing when they lay out their mythology and their own alien races and planets. But yeah, then there were other ones where it's like, it kind of, you got so many subgenres, and it's like, yeah, you either dig it because of the various portrayals and the storylines, or you just dig it because it's watchable. I definitely would recommend this show still, but if you don't see it, don't sweat it. It's just...
You're not missing out, but it would be cool for you to see it so you can be like, oh, I see what they're talking about.
That, and just see what other shows were doing at the time, and
yeah,
see why
absolutely.
you liked or hated those kinds of shows.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is still streaming on Prime Video and airs for those who still have cable like me. It's on Start TV all the time now, 24/7. I definitely prefer it over a lot of those other shows that were trying too hard again to be kind of just have a psychic or have someone solve a mysterious death while doing other crazy crimes. It's very interesting how it would have a lot of gritty stuff mentioned, and yet it didn't show it completely, and yet you never felt like anything you were being served was rendered false by any overacting or just outrageous plot. And Jordan technically wasn't even a psychic. She was just someone who had all these nightmares, and she tried to piece them together and try to figure out why she kept having that nightmare. And
yeah, profiler.
Very profiler, especially with how, on Bones, they just did the whole, let's do a hologram and let's be anti-CSI.
Let's science this shit up, yeah.
Let's science it up. And, Rizzoli and Isles just had the, we're doing all of those, then we're mixing with Cagney and Lacey and Heat-type battles.
Work, yeah.
And Seven-type villains. And this one was kind of more, it was kind of still in profiler. And so Profiler was kind of the loser to all the other shows, and this was kind of the loser to all the other post 2000 shows. And but yeah, she did
That's
exactly.
funny that you say that because I actually have to agree with you on that. As much as I don't want to,
but great.
Yeah,
I mean, Lie to Me kind of was the loser to Criminal Minds, so it was like,
God, I love Lie to Me.
It was a great show too, but I can't say I saw every episode. But at the same time,
it
was great. But
well, I love him, so that doesn't make it very difficult for me.
Well, the whole cast was good. I mean, that's where I knew Monica Raymond before she was on Chicago Fire. But I mean,
nice.
Yeah, same kind of thing. Where it's just like, I mean, it kind of even you saw shows that were even trying to be like The Shield even later on, and
I was gonna say
I knew people who would have loved The Shield, but they didn't want to see it because they hated cop shows, but they liked stuff like Ray Donovan or Power or Sopranos. I'm like, you're gonna love, if you love Breaking Bad, you're gonna love The Shield. In fact, Breaking Bad owes its existence to this show. Bryan Cranston even said so, and I could get some people to watch it and other people not to. But yeah, it was just a show that had cops, but it kind of like Homicide and The Wire. It wasn't really just a cop show. It was just a crime action mystery with some dark humor. And yeah, this was pretty much, just kind of like Profiler is like, it's just an alternative viewing, and I recommend it for those who just want to see, again, just some other kind of just weird, twisted stuff without getting grossed out or feeling like it's just full of itself, making it up as it went along. It's definitely interesting how, both her and Dr. Waters on Profiler just wouldn't just imagine themselves as the victim, although neither show was particularly graphic. It was always just kind of in just the discovery. They find something in a trash can, you're like, ew, gross.
I was gonna ask you about that. So, like in Crossing Jordan, how do you feel like with the crimes that were happening and everything that she was seeing and the nightmares? How do you feel like that kind of went with hand in hand with any of the other shows, or do you think it's done along with that?
I think it was a gentler CSI for those parents who were concerned about their kids seeing something graphic on CSI. They didn't have to worry about that, or the risque, back and forth, people giving the "I really love you" looks. Is like, this one was kind of more like, everything I've seen so far is like, any bodies or aftermath, it's really not too gruesome. There are some disturbing discoveries, but it's never at an X-Files level where you're like, bordering the line between PG-13 and R. But yeah, Profiler was kind of the same thing too. You'd see, realistic gunshots, but never, blood pouring out or gruesome knife fights like you'd see on something like NYPD Blue or Nash Bridges. And two totally different shows and tones, but same kind of execution, so to speak, literally. And yeah, again, I mean, Lie to Me was kind of the same way too. You were going to have, again, and it was the loser. It was an awesome show, but it lost to The Following and Criminal Minds and all the other stuff that was on. So even the shows that had been on for way too long that were still on. So it's like, yeah, I mean, if you wanted a Criminal Minds type show that wasn't Criminal Minds, you kind of went to Lie to Me, because like, yeah, it's going to be a psychological game, and it's not going to be terribly graphic. You're not going to get any, someone saying, "Oh, the serial killer's getting off on violence." Oh, it's like, there's not even anything like that. It was all kind of just, well, I've outwitted you. It was kind of, I guess you could say, they were inspired by the best Sherlock Holmes and definitely Law and Order: Criminal Intent, but way less morbid, and even Murder, She Wrote. Yeah, definitely Monk. I think.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. Monk is just a milk version of Murder, She Wrote. I mean,
it really is. It's a funny show. I think it's kind of even enhanced by Monk. Even is like, we can, Monk is going to be very serious and just have few more dry humorous moments that the actors kind of make come to life. And like, Psych was just very much kind of like we're the anti-everything. We're just like Community was kind of the anti-college shows. Like we're the anti-mystery crime comedy show. Where we are hard to even describe. You just have to see us. And I think that's just it. I mean, Lie to Me, Crossing Jordan, and Profiler were just hard to describe without and stand out based on that description. Is like, and it was just a visual thing. Because I mean, I've seen other shows like The Mentalist. I can never really get into that. And then there was Body of Proof, which I think is good, but it's another show. It's like we've seen too much of it. It just didn't really stand out, even though the acting was phenomenal on it.
What do you think about like The Mentalist? Do you think that was similar to the shows that were going on that time? Or?
Yeah, because remember Psych was making fun of that, and I definitely know they had at least one subtle Lie to Me joke. And then you had The Closer, which, she closes every case, So
that's why she's the closer, right?
Right. And so I think at that point, everyone's just, they had to acknowledge one another. It was just to avoid any hints of rivalry. It was even just to acknowledge, like, yeah, we got onto the air because of you or because the network wanted a rival show to you. We can joke
like
about
the Finder versus Bones.
Oh, totally. They're definitely a good example. And yeah, it's like we talked about the shows that spun off with, and it's like Rosewood was fun and slick, but so was The Glades, and that was a cable show on A&E.
I like The Glades.
Yeah, that was fun, but I'm sure that one had a hell of a time selling itself. What are you going to do different from Magnum PI and CSI type scenarios? Like, we're just going to be slick and cool. When
That's
Longmire,
why I think Crossing Jordan, if it wouldn't have had the extra that it did, especially towards the end, I don't think it would have lasted as long as it did.
No. And I mean, you could even say the same thing about Longmire and Justified.
Yep.
Those were
absolutely
neo-Western shows. And basically, FX just wanted something, and it pretty much only got made, I think, just because they had some actors from The Shields and Son of Anarchy on it. But it was so different from any of those. And same thing with Longmire. It was a well-rated show, but A&E didn't want it. They wanted to just re-air stuff that was owned by them or Disney. That, the reality shows is what they wanted to become. And so it's like, it's not the A&E I remember. A&E used to re-air, every acclaimed kind of thing from BBC to NBC.
Well, look at the quote-unquote History Channel. Don't get me started.
Yeah, it's a reality channel, but it claims to be history because it mixes in the ancient aliens and re-airs some of its documentaries that they were great and they discontinued years ago. So yeah, I think management just stands out like a sore thumb, and viewers are sick of it. They, if it doesn't, and there's still many I still encounter to this day. You've encountered plenty of them where they're like, if it's not on Netflix, if it's not at a Big Lots store that I can buy for $5, I will never touch it. I don't, and there's plenty of people who we know, they will only watch it if it is on streaming or a Blu-ray. And it's just ridiculous because they also miss out on some other stuff that they would have liked or even had enjoyed growing up 10 years ago. They, there's just too much out there. So
I agree. There is too much out there, but I feel like, I see what you're saying with Crossing Jordan, though. I mean, it might not been like a standout show, but I feel like, yeah, people should definitely go see it.
It's fun.
For curiosity's sake.
You definitely won't. Did you feel like anything dated poorly? I only saw like two questionable CGI shots. It was very limited, and I let it go because it was.
I mean, I don't even count flip phones anymore. Just
no, I love flip phones.
you're gonna get that. You're gonna get that in the 90s, 2000s. I mean, shit. You look at. I was watching the first episode of New Girl, right, with the Chanel.
They definitely
use
watching
flip sports with his flip phone, and I was like, damn, how old is this show? I thought it was more recent than that, but no, it was 2000s. And
there's talk about them bringing back flip phones and razors, and that's what I liked about what show was it? They did that first season of Bosch, where it's like he had an old phone and he hadn't updated it yet.
Absolutely. I mean, look at Gibbs. NCIS he still uses a flip phone even now. So
yeah, they catered
that's
to
a
that
running
joke.
joke.
That became
That's
part
a
of
running joke.
the gimmick. He's
Absolutely.
the boomer who just can't die, and he's too stubborn, and he's too dedicated that anyone else, it would have just been a bland, dickhead. You're like, I don't understand the love-hate relationship with this at all, and somehow they made it work by layering them and surprising us. And yeah, I mean, this show didn't have any moments where I thought, someone was pretty sexist.
That was a little questionable.
That yeah,
I think the CGI is always going to be questionable because, I mean, if you look at Heroes now, you're like, oh.
Yeah, there were rape victims, but they were never shown
just,
or graphically
detailed. You're going to see a difference, just like if you see the first Harry Potter versus now. It is what it is for what it was at the time, but they weren't overly abusive with it either. It wasn't like every fucking shot was that. No, you were getting actors acting in a show and the occasional CGI. I think when they did it, it was necessary. I don't think it was like I don't think they really had the money for it since they were doing so much fucking like pan outs, like we were talking about.
Yeah, I think the actors
really
each got
shots.
paid. Like, I don't think the actors even made $2 million until they were in season 4 or 5.
I agree, only because the money that was going into was production and
they were just thankful to be working, and
you had some big shots that are really expensive, so they weren't really getting money until it was already happening for so long time. They got picked up for those last couple seasons because of that crossover, and they're like, well, we can put our money now into the CGI. You know what I mean? I felt like they needed it when they needed it, but when it wasn't, it was fine.
Yep, you get what you get. Well, thank you all so much for joining me on this special.
I always enjoy coming on here and talking to you about our awesome shows that we both like or dislike.
Don't worry, guys.
I always have fun.
After Lord of the Rings, I'm sure we'll get into comics and games, just other funny stuff.
Yes, there's so many goodies I want to get into. Absolutely.
For sure.
We'll return after these messages.
Hey, feeling down? Feeling low? Not enough podcasts about movies in your life? Why not try
They must be destroyed on sight.
the new Podcast Cure-All, sure to get you right with the world and on a path to better living. We have exploitation, we have Italian horror, we have zombies, we have slashers, we have crime films, we have spaghetti westerns, we even have sci-fi and sex comedies. So take a dose of
They must be destroyed on sight.
as needed, and let the hosts, Lee Russell, Daniel Harper, Paul Romali, and the odd guest host cure what ails you.
Warning, may cause atrophy, African consumption, black fever, bone shave, chin cough, colic, cramp colic, dropsy of the brain, elephantitis, grocer's itch, jaundice, mania, miasma, mortification, palsy, Pott's disease, rheumatism, scurvy, St. Anthony's fire, summer complaint, and worm fit in some people. Consult a physician before listening.
Hey, I heard you like movies.
I heard you like to hustle.
I heard you like podcasts.
Well, guess what?
There's a podcast for you out there called The Home Video Hustle.
Damn right.
Every Friday we talk about whatever movie PJ picks out the bag. What does that mean? Every Wednesday on our YouTube page, I put a bunch of movies in a bag, and PJ picks one out at random. And then we just watch it. We talk about it for maybe like an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever we feel like doing, wherever the conversation leads us.
But do we actually talk about the movie?
Most of the time. Tangents galore.
Yes.
So believe me, we may be a movie podcast, but it's not always about movies. We may talk about video games, music. Yeah, that's the big one, music. Sometimes we might get a little bit of politicalness in there.
Yes.
Sometimes we may just, we know what we like to do. We like to tell stories, PJ.
Yes.
I am the master storyteller of the podcast realm. Undefeated. So if you like to hear about movies, video games, whatever foolishness comes to our mind, the most random stuff you could think of, check out the Home Video Hustle. You can find us on the Stitchers, the Google Play, Apple Podcasts,
What else?
Podbean,
What else?
Podcast Addict,
Goddamn.
all that. Ain't no reason you can't get your hustle on. We everywhere, worldwide, baby.
Hustle, motherfucking hustle.
Hey, we can't cuss in the promo, PJ.
Ah.
We gotta be family friendly. There may be podcasts out there that don't want his hair say
Ah, yeah.
All that good fun stuff.
Well, you.
Yeah. don't run the listeners away, PJ.
Ah, I'm sorry.
But this is going kind of long.
Yes.
So we're going to end this and say, hey, check out the Home Video Hustle every Friday on all the various podcast outlets. Peace.
Peace.
As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster. And while Witch didn't make it to the top of the world, he did make the Gangs of Hollywood podcast. So join the gang and enjoy a movie review podcast about movie gangs, gangsters, mobsters, and the mayhem they cause. You can find GOH Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at GOH Pod at www.gohpod.com, as well as your favorite podcast listening app. And remember, say hello to your little friend for me.
If you take two old punk rockers who are past their prime, put them in front of a movie screen, and give them a podcast, what do you get? Cinema Punks. Cinepunks. It's the mixtape of movies.
Did you ever see a film at such a young age it left you traumatized with cinematic wounds? Necrophilia. It's a dead issue, man. Don't push it. Cinema Psyops is a weekly podcast documenting an ongoing experiment on the mind of an unwilling test subject.
No one should have to watch this movie.
Oh, no one should have to watch this?
No one should have to watch this movie.
Surprisingly, it's not a topic that a lot of people really want to tackle.
I'm shocked, prudes.
I know, really.
Right?
It's the next sexual frontier that no one wants to explore.
I am, in the most sincerest of senses, disappointed in you.
It takes a powerful goddess like Connie, jam her arm down the monster's throat and kill it. Oh, I'm still tripping out over that. Even as a kid, I was like, I gotta find a girl like that. Every week, I get a new look of disappointment that I never thought I could get out of her.
Unimaginable. At 12 years old, you should not be watching this movie.
Obviously.
At 13, you should not be. 14, you shouldn't be. I'm not entirely sure even 17-year-olds should be watching this movie.
Just because you're offended by something doesn't mean that you have the right to demand that it doesn't exist. Watching this film again, I had all of this like little nerd glee with everything that kept
little
popping
history
up.
doll popping up
absolutely.
at you.
So I totally loved this film.
Hey, I know why you couldn't see that. It's because your brain's warped from watching this shit at 12 years old.
Yeah, this is a rough movie. I told you ahead of time when we were getting ready to do it that it was
How
going to be a
could you
rough
watch
one.
this shit at 12?
Because physical wounds heal, cinematic ones don't. Listen to Cinema Psyops.
Hey everybody, I'm Corey.
And I'm Zach, and we're the hosts of Podcasting After Dark, a cast dedicated to late-night horror and sci-fi of the 80s and 90s, often found on HBO and Cinemax.
You know, the movies your parents didn't want you watching as a kid. You can find us every other week on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, and Stitcher.
This is what you want.
This is what you get.
It's time, let's check our cue, baby. Pair it with a couple brews, baby. We love good movies. We love the bad ones too. So we watch them all and pass their lessons on to you. Oh yeah. Everything I learned from movies helps to make life a little bit groovy. Whether one laughs, plot holes, or gratuitous movies, it's time to get busy with your friend Steve and Izzy at eilfm.podbean.com.
Welcome to Who Was She podcast. I am your host, Tara Jabari. After a decade working in documentaries, marketing, and all things digital media, I found that podcasting is a strong medium to share stories. After years of producing for others, I decided to start my own biographical podcast. Who Was She will focus on the life of a woman throughout Baha'i history. The first season is about Lydia Zemenov. Lydia's story explores the subjects of the power of language and faith. Her father invented the universal language Esperanto, and she came from a Jewish family and became a Baha'i. She grew up during World War I and was killed during World War II in a concentration camp, despite heroic efforts to save her life. How can one person's life intersect with so many others, connect across borders, and inspire a biography which inspired this podcast? Over the next few weeks, I will share her story with you and the lives that were most affected by her and those who affected her life as well. They include her father, Ludwig Zemenov, her spiritual mother, American journalist Martha Root, and the Baha'i German soldier Fritz Mako, who worked for the resistance undercover while having to serve the Nazi Party. I want to thank the author Wendy Heller and George Ronald Publishing for their blessing to let me use Heller's biography, Lydia, The Life of Lydia Zemenov, Daughter of Esperanto, as a main and instrumental resource for this podcast. So please subscribe and learn about this amazing woman who traveled through 3 continents in an effort to bring unity through the power of language. You can also find more information on our Instagram, Facebook, and Pinterest at Who Was She Podcast. Music was composed and performed by Sam Red. I am your host, Tara Jabari. Join us next time as we begin our journey about Lydia Zemenov.
Hi everybody, it's Mac Jackson. I wanted to invite you to a new site called the Forever Adventure Network. This website has everything. Pictures, videos, blogs. There's original music by Harmony Constant, 2 podcasts. One is the MacGyver podcast, where we celebrate Richard Dean Anderson, his iconic roles, and how it's influenced our lives. There's episode discussions, interviews, and life conversations. The second podcast is the Never Gets Old podcast, where we celebrate all the best things that we love in life, from TV, movies, music, and comics. The site is also the home for the MacGyver SG-1 audio series, an ongoing adventure series that continues the adventures of MacGyver and SG-1. There are also multiple stores to choose from for all of your pop culture and adventure needs. Come on by and check us out today. And thanks for joining the adventure.
Are you sick of the same old stale podcasts? Well, then join Vanessa and Darren as they dissect movies of all kinds. The 2 lifelong cinema lovers bring their favorites, curiosities, and first-time watches to the operating table and inject them with a healthy dose of snark. Then there's the waiting room, where they examine books and short stories. So just look for them on Apple Podcasts and where fine podcasts are available. They're part of the Legion Podcast Network. Follow them on Twitter at VDClinicPod. Join them on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/VDClinicPod. Or email them at vdclinicpod@gmail.com. They're ready to cure what ails you. And still, they just might be a little contagious.
Hi there. It's Heather from the Watching Netflix Without You podcast. Did you know that there are over 1,200 Netflix original feature films and documentaries? And that number is only growing. So I've made it my mission to watch as many as I possibly can. Then, with a delightful guest or guests, Disclaimer, more often than not my brother Ryan. We spend an episode rating, reviewing, and discussing a film at length. The first half of every episode is spoiler-free for those who haven't seen it yet. And in the second half, after a very clear spoiler warning, we dive into it. And that's really about it. You can listen to Watching Netflix Without You on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and more.
We now continue with our program.
Follow us on the web on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The podcast is available on Podbean, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Anchor, Apple, and anywhere else podcasts are available. Feel free to review our show and leave comments on any of those sites. Thanks a million for listening.
It's a jacked up